Did you know that 80% of nurse educators report being anxious about the exam analysis questions on the C&E exam? So many of us feel like we're ill-equipped, or perhaps that we just don't have enough knowledge as it relates to being able to answer the question on the C&E exam when it shows up and asks us about point binomial index, distractor evaluation, or even the correct option and what that even means. Welcome back to Dr. Sellars Educate, where our mission is simple, and it is to support every single nurse educator on the journey to achieve nursing excellence. Now, that may mean for some of you passing the C&E exam. For others, it may mean that you just want to be a really good nurse educator when you show up in the classroom. In the next several series, we'll be focusing on exam analysis, since so many of us are anxious about those questions whenever they show up on the C&E exam. In this Snapshot series, we'll be continuing to use Prezi. So if you're not familiar with Prezi, that's Prezi. This is the presentation software that we're using right now to ensure that we are going to connect with our visual learners. Our auditory learners, that's pretty easy because we are recording this episode. However, what we also know about the Finch model that was published in 2000 is that our ability to connect with our auditory learners may not happen through lecturing alone. We want to incorporate visual elements to engage and connect with the visual learner. In addition to the audio, they want to see our lips. They want to see the content that we are presenting. And so for our kinesthetic learners, we have something for you too. Go ahead and print out the study worksheet that's listed right here in this snapshot. And if you're listening to us on our podcast, that's Dr. Sellars Educate, we are with you as you move around and try to organize your schedule so that you're closing your knowledge gap. So we have several different resources that are available to you in order to connect with us as you move through your process steps on the journey. For those of you that are returning, we are happy that you're here. If this is your first time, make sure you subscribe so every single time a new snapshot is released, you'll be notified right away. And let's go ahead and dig into our content as you get ready to hopefully think about the thought-provoking question and what the best answer is. What is it that you can expect on the C&E exam as it relates to exam analysis questions? Well, we're glad that you asked. We have developed this exam analysis assessment, so you can click the QR code right here on the screen, or if you're listening to us, it is also included in the description below. What this tool will do for you is give you a little bit of introduction to some of the concepts that we'll be talking about today. And it allows you to see what your score was, okay? And it's a very short exercise as indicated here. Competency 3 or domain 3, what is it that we will be evaluated on? Well, it's more than just exam analysis. That's the good news. It is also looking at what tools we are using to validate that learning has happened in the classroom setting, in the laboratory setting, as well as in the clinical setting, okay? But for purposes of this snapshot, we're only focusing on exam analysis. Distractor evaluation, that is the first focus for our series. And then we're going to talk about item description in our next snapshot. And then last but not least is item difficulty. Go ahead and write down for me right now if you're not sure exactly what these terms mean. We're going to give you a resource. There are a couple of different resources we want you to use, actually. Dr. Caputi's C&E review book is the primary one we're using for this snapshot. But if you have Billings and Halstead, you can pull that one out as well. And you're going to focus on chapter 25, okay, in Billings and Halstead. This is going to give you a lot of good information related to these concepts that we'll be talking through today. All right, so let's take a look at the information that you were given related to what we call our thought-provoking question. So how do each of these terms match to the specific data that is described in this snapshot of our exam analysis? So let's talk through it a little bit more. What we have here is just a snapshot of a Nursing 320 Adult Health 1 course and the specific distractors and the measures associated with the discrimination, which is known as our point binomial index, between each of the options. So we know the correct option or the correct answer is D, and we can see the point biserial index is 0.33, and then for the incorrect option of C, it is 0.25, positive 0.25. For B, another incorrect option, it is negative 0.20, and for A, another incorrect option, is 0. Point biserial index is 0. This is what you are looking to match the information with. Okay, so we have 4 different options. We're looking at the level of discrimination, and we know the passing score, by the way, is 78%. So number 1 is test takers who scored lower on the exam selected the distractor. So which one of these options, A through D, does that number align with? What is the definition? What is the level of discrimination associated with this specific with these specific letters? So pick one. Okay, and then number 2, the level of discrimination is poor and no one selected this distractor. Which of these letters are matched with that information? Number 3, test takers who scored higher on the exam selected the correct answer. And then number 4, test takers who scored higher on the exam selected the distractor, requires revision. Okay, so what you want to do is think about what is the information that you know based on Dr. Caputi's C&E review book that you have reviewed, or Billings and Halstead. Okay, so that's what you want to think about. And again, you have access to the exam analysis to be able to help guide you on your journey towards clarifying concepts that may still be a little muddy for you as you're watching this snapshot. So let's talk about it. What is a distractor anyway? Well, it is also known as our incorrect options on an exam. It can be evaluated a number of different ways. You could see on the analysis point biserial index. It could also be reported as a distractor index or point biserial correlation coefficient. A negative number for our distractor indicates that it is effective. It has done its job, okay? An effective distractor is able to attract the test taker who does not know the content well to select the correct answer. If you need a deeper review of content, pages 62 and 63 in Dr. Caputi's review book gives you a good description of how the DI and PBI are calculated and what they actually mean. Now let's talk a little bit about what the positive number means. That indicates that students scoring well on the exam are selecting the distractor instead of the correct answer. So we are attracting, with our distractor, the students who have scored higher on the exam. That is not what we want. We always want our distractors to be negative, okay? If a distractor is positive, we want to consider revising the distractor. Now, there are several different elements you want to consider, but first and foremost, if we have a positive distractor, then something's wrong because we have not attracted the learner that was not most knowledgeable about the content. Okay, we have attracted a learner that we would have expected to be knowledgeable about the content based on all of the other factors that are part of the exam analysis. All right, so what are we going to do? Well, first, we want to think about what are the other distractors. Okay, so we have 3 different distractors. We're still using a standard 4-option exam, okay, for purposes of this review of content. And so we want to see what are the other distractors. How are they attracting the low-scoring student? If we have a PBI score of 0, it indicates that no one selected that distractor. So it is ineffective. That's what happens when we have a PBI of 0. It is ineffective for the distractor. It means that no student has chosen the distractor, that specific distractor. Distractors that are not chosen increases the chances of being correct when guessing. Okay, so it means that whenever we have a distractor of 0, we haven't written it very well because we weren't able to attract our student that was not knowledgeable about the content to choose the distractor. So what happens? They have a likelihood of guessing with the other 3 options. They've increased their likelihood to guess the correct option. All right, so now let's talk about what the information is telling us based on our snapshot of the PBI and the different choices that are in front of us. So if you matched number 1 with B, you are correct. Okay, so give yourself a round of applause. Okay, so test takers who scored lower on the exam and selected the distractor. What is it about B that tells us this information? Well, first, it is negative. Remember, we always want our distractors to be negative, so we have effectively attracted the student who is not knowledgeable about the content more often than we have the student who is knowledgeable about the content. How do we know that? Because it is negative. We always want our distractors to be negative. Next is number 2. It is mapped and aligned with choice A, which tells us a PBI of 0 has poor discrimination because no one selected the distractor. Okay, so what we would want to consider is a qualitative review of this information. So we want to engage in an exam review. We want to talk to the students about why they didn't choose A, and that's when we're going to determine what our next steps would be. Okay, so we want to tuck this away as a consideration before we do our qualitative review with our students, mapping to the blueprint. So let's go back, look at choice A, look and see if it was convincing enough to us when we reviewed the exam blueprint and when we initially wrote the question that it would have attracted the students. So do we need to make a tweak to one word in the sentence, or do we want to revise the distractor completely? Okay, so we want to do further evaluation, further assessment with additional information to determine what changes we want to make to the distractor. And then we have number 3. It is correlated with letter D. Test takers who scored higher on the exam selected the correct answer. Okay, and we know that because the correct option is positive, which we always want that to happen for our correct option. That means that our high scoring students selected the option or selected the correct answer more often than our low scoring students. That's what the positive for our correct option, our correct answer tells us. And then C is aligned with option 4. Test takers who scored higher on the exam selected the distractor requires revision. So we know that C, the point by zero index, is positive 0.25. Well, we don't want our distractors to be positive, so that means we need to change it, right? We probably need to change the distractor because we want to attract our students that are not knowledgeable more often, right, at a higher rate than we do those learners that are knowledgeable about the content. So that's what we want to do. Again, we want to go back, look at the mapping of the blueprint and see how did the content in option C, what was the content in that incorrect answer that was supposed to attract the student who was not knowledgeable, and what changes do we need to make? So if you did not choose any of the correct answers for this matching exercise, we don't want you to be too critical of yourself. Do make sure that you take a look at that exam analysis assessment. You can retake it as many times as you need to, okay? We just want to ensure that you are closing your knowledge gaps using the primary resources that we talked about. And reach out to us if you have any further questions or if there's a way that we can better support you. We hope this snapshot has been helpful, and we will see you next time. Have a great one, everybody.